Well, welcome to the Southern Tier, day 18. This is the road going up to Alpine, Texas. I started late in the day. I was worried about running out of time for this portion of the ride, that is to Austin, Texas. This is the first Southern Tier bike rider I actually met on this ride. And of course, they're using some of the different roads that I was using. Extremely nice gentleman, and he's riding by himself. I later met two more men further up the road, but they were not riding with this gentleman. We offered him some water, even used the restroom, and he said he was fine and went on the way. You can see how much the wind is blowing by looking at his shirt, but it really doesn't give you a true feeling of the wind this day. But here we are at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he's still bundled up for his ride. The problem that we got is I was just planning on doing a quick 60-mile ride on up to Alpine. And once I started, I realized I'm not going to get there by the end of the day. Anyhow, so we spoke with this gentleman for a little bit, and we left separately, even though I just left in front of him before this. The reason being, of course, he was only going several miles an hour, and there was no way I could go that slow and enjoy the ride talking to him and get anywhere on time. I wouldn't even make it to the first city on up the road, which I believe is Marfa. This is a part of the ride on the Southern Tier, the official Southern Tier, where much of the ride that I was doing thus far was actually my version of this Southern Tier. And that's because I was picking a more direct route and what I consider to be a safer route. So it looks like we're getting ready to go, and you're going to see that there's really nothing to see here. Even though we're going uphill, this is uphill all the way to Alpine. So if you look on my gradient on the right side of the screen, you'll see that we go continually uphill until we get up around the city of Alpine. Then it drops down into Alpine and then goes back up a little bit. The flat part you see on your left in terms of the gradient, that's actually where I had to stop my ride because there was just no way I was going to make it to Alpine. The winds were blowing 20 to 30 miles an hour, and I would say more accurately 25 to 30 miles an hour. I was pushing myself as hard as I could. I, of course, had an e-bike. These other gentlemen were riding regular bikes, and they had a fully loaded pack where I had nothing but a small little bag on the back, along with my drinks and things like that. Okay, so we're trying again. What happened, here's my second rider. I have, other than tying his shoes, he's obviously taking a break, and the next rider I come up with is also taking a break. I had a brief discussion to see if he was riding with the gentleman that I just passed, and he advised me no. I got the impression he was riding alone, but when I met this other gentleman on up the road, he of course advised me that that's not accurate at all. He was riding with this gentleman behind him, and he was waiting for him to catch up to him. So again, after a brief discussion with him, I couldn't take any time to really talk to him because I was just kind of going much slower than I had planned on, And as it was, I started late in the day. I was originally going to start down in Van Horn and ride up, but with this wind, excuse me, there was no way that I would have made it from Van Horn. And as it was, I miscalculated it, got there later than I thought, and there was no way I was going to make it to Alpine. I'd be stuck in the middle of nowhere. Of course, I wouldn't really be stuck because I have my wife following me in the motorhome, so we could have just driven there, but I preferred to ride into Alpine if I could. So I opted out to take I believe it was like 7 miles, but it might have been, well, more or less than that, somewhere around there, into Marfa, and I got on the other side of Marfa. You'll see in the video where that happens. Again, this terrain is terrible. I could continually go around in circles and you really wouldn't see anything. I do have a GoPro 360 video camera that I'm taking these pictures with, and I actually really like it, other than it's really hard to edit the pictures. That's a choice I made when I purchased it. I could have used my other GoPro, but that's just a regular front-facing camera. So here we are coming up on the 3rd Southern Tier rider. Again, as you can see from what I wrote in there, he's with the rider that I just passed. This gentleman, if you notice, he's small in stature, but he's riding faster than the gentleman behind him. Of course, the gentleman is much taller, but also much heavier. So while he gains strength in the added weight that he carries, boy, it's a lot easier to climb and go into the strong headwind when you're a smaller individual, or have an e-bike. So again, I really screwed up, but because I was in such a hurry, I didn't get the names of these 3 gentlemen, and hopefully they at some point in time get to briefly see these videos. I guess not a lot of people are really watching this, but this was more for me than anything else. So here I left him and headed on my way again. I'm way behind, and it was shortly after this point when I left him that I had made up my mind to, when I met up with Vicky the next time, I was going to hop in the motorhome and get the ride up to Marfa. I was really surprised. So I don't know how clear it is, but I think you can see the motorhome off in the distance. And off in the right is a little dirigible. You really don't see it very well in this picture. And I understand that they can use that for keeping track of the border and the immigrants illegally crossing the border. So here I am, and then the ride ends. At this point, now you're going to see me getting out of the motorhome and starting my ride. And that flat straight spot again on the gradient to your right is where I started at. And if you didn't look, you probably wouldn't even know that I did that. Again, that on this side of Marfa, there was no real big difference. Everything started out pretty flat. There were a few more buildings here because we're near town, and that is about it. But the only consistent thing was that it was a steady uphill. And I'm assuming we came downhill. In fact, I know we did, into Marfa. but that's not reflected on the map because I wasn't riding at the time. It just drew a straight line for elevation. Now the top map, of course, is the actual riding, and you can see it's a pretty straight line, and it continues to be a straight line all the way up almost to the top of the hill, and then it starts curving around. This is much like much of my trip so far once I got up into the high desert area of Arizona and New Mexico. So what you've got on the screen now is the actual video. You can see where I've seated here. That is off to the side of the road, and it'll connect up with the marker right about there. And I've got back on the road and climbed up. I just did this in each one of my videos to give everybody a brief idea of the area that I actually rode through and an overview of the terrain and a little better feeling of the area. You can see pretty much though how barren it is in that video. And thanks to Relief for providing that. That was a little loud. So here we are back, and it just continues on up. I don't know how much I turned the video around. Not as much, but if for no other reason, there's really nothing to see right here. When I get up higher near the top of the mountain, or hill, whatever you want to call it, I turn the video much more frequently. Of course, I've broken the video up quite a bit because the ride was just kind of, well, dull. Now we're finally getting into where the hills have hills, so you can actually see something in front of you. Much better than just driving on a terrain that looks the same every mile. At least this, you have something in front of you to look at, and shortly we'll be going through those hills. I unfortunately didn't have the mileage and everything else like that going on this screen, just because of the way I edited it. If I was to do this again, I think I'd do this at 10 times the speed and just run the everything all the way through it and then do it. I've got to be honest, it takes a long time. So if you're wondering about me, you can see I've got a mirror that I wear on my glasses. I either have one on the helmet or the glasses. I bought a new mirror for this around the time of this ride, so it was just fitting on the glasses. I don't have a real preference. They all seem about the same. I have a regular Garmin computer, the 1030 Plus, and I also have a rear radar by Garmin, and I have the Garmin rear radar that has the pictures, so it continually takes pictures should some unfortunate incident happen. There would at least be some evidence of what happened based on the picture itself. So I'd have the camera that I'm taking pictures on, as well as the Garmin. If you haven't used rear view radar by Garmin, what it tells you are the cars that are coming up on you, and If there's 5 cars, it'll show you 5 different dots on the screen coming up at different speeds. And so you can keep track of who's going to be coming up on you. So that where I use it is where I turn left or where I don't have room to ride very safely on the shoulder. It does allow me to ride in the road knowing that there's no cars behind me. Then I can move over when I see a car coming. The other things I do is I have a rear flashing light to warn the cars, and I also have a rear flashing red and blue light trying to get their attention as well. I don't know how bright it is, but it's just one more thing to attract attention to the riders. I prefer riding with a bright jersey. Today's jersey is yellow. I have a red one and several other colored, and some a lot darker. You see, I opted out for a yellow helmet. My helmets all previously had been white. I bought this one solely because of the small visor, and it really did help with the sun in my eyes, believe it or not. It made a big difference. The other thing I make sure I do is any helmet I have is a MIPS, that's MIPS helmet. And that's supposed to help you if you get in an accident. I can tell you about 5 years ago, I did get in a serious bicycle accident where I broke both my wrists, split my bike in half when I rear-ended a car that had stopped in the bike lane and I had not seen it, and I took out the rear window with my head. So the helmet might have saved my life in that particular incident. And it was shortly after that accident that I ended up riding an e-bike, because shortly after that accident, just around the time that COVID started, I had 6 stents and a pacemaker placed in my good old chest and heart area. And then more recently, I had a very minor heart attack. Now, having said all that, I've been riding the e-bike seriously since about I was 72, maybe 71, and I gave my other bike to my son in the hopes that he'd use it after I had rebuilt it. So I really prefer riding an e-bike. My e-bike, this one, is a Specialized Creo, and I admit that I do like it. It has 3 levels of assist, and if you don't know, you can buy an e-bike that you can have a throttle, but at that point in time I'll go buy a motorcycle if that's what I want. I bought a pedal assist bike, which means that if you aren't pedaling, your bike will stop. If you're going downhill, it obviously won't. But the only time the motor comes on is to assist you when you're pedaling. Otherwise, it's off. And depending on what country and what kind of bike you buy, the speed of the bike could vary from 20 miles an hour max. In my particular case, my bike can provide assistance up to 28. I don't know. I don't feel bad at all. I've ridden from Sacramento to Canada on a fully loaded touring bike with all my camping and gear, all my clothes, all my food, everything I needed for my trip from Sacramento, California up to British Columbia, Canada, on a regular touring bike, and I enjoyed that. And that was just a 9-day trip. This is actually a longer trip, but the level of assist really varies, so that because the bike is just plain heavier, if you use the first level of assist, it's just a little better than having a bike without a motor. I got to tell you, it is better even on the first level of assist. But when you get a hurry, get behind, or you're really tired, you can go up to a second level and third level of assist for the specialized. The giant bikes, for instance, have 5 levels of assist and a bigger motor. Specialized bikes are much lighter, so they have a smaller motor and smaller battery, but they get about the same distance because the bike's so much lighter. So the amount of effort you put into it is based on the what you want. My preference riding around town is put it in level 1 assist and just ride it like a normal bike and just enjoy it. But when it comes to riding, to give you an example, I would normally ride before I got an e-bike at a rate of 18 to 20 miles an hour. I've slowed down a little bit after my last accident 5 years ago, and I ride anywhere from 15 to 18 miles an hour here. Some of that's because of age, but so I can ride at the same speed I rode before I got my e-bike. I can even ride faster, but there's not a huge difference. I'm not an expert rider. I think my record for an hour ride is 20 miles an hour on flatland for 1 hour. In the hills, I believe it's about 18.5 miles an hour, which isn't fast when you compare it to what the pros would do, say around 31 miles an hour in the hills. So if you do have any questions, you can always contact me after watching the video, or just contact somebody concerning e-bikes. What other safety features? Well, again, for me, bright clothing, whatever I can do to attract people's attention, like flashing lights, my rear view camera. I don't always have a camera mounted. When we go back and if it shows the view from the front, you can see my GoPro 360 in the shaded in the bike in front, but you'll never see a picture of it because it wipes it out. So right there is my GoPro 360. I ride with it basically, so if you're wondering, it sticks out to my right hand side and picks up people behind me or a view, or in front. But obviously it's blocked very slightly on my left side. So we're coming up basically on the road running into Alpine. The hills have made themselves much better looking. I've got an actual wide shoulder here that's enjoyable riding on, that it hasn't always been. Earlier, when I started out, it was actually a terrible shoulder. Let's see, we've lost our shoulders here. That's kind of weird. But I think we get a good shoulder back here up the road. At this point in the ride, the wind had actually died down. Oh, there goes my wife driving by in our motorhome. So things weren't all that bad this part of the day. And coming up into Alpine, we still got a little ways to go, and I think what I did was cut out a lot of the ride before this because it was just all the same thing. Now at least here there's a little variation. Hills off to the side and hills, mountains, things like that, just off. Now, if you're not familiar with Alpine, it's actually a very small city. Our purpose in actually going there was to visit with my wife's aunt. Has a home there. We just spent the night there. We stayed in our motorhome in her driveway. Had breakfast with her. Then, well, was it breakfast for lunch? Lunch with her the next day, and then I went on my way. The pictured off to the right is actually my ride for tomorrow, and you can see it's actually pretty cool. Today's a beautiful day. It's not hot by any means, and I still have my long sleeve jersey on, so I'm not sure it got up to 70, but boy, it was cool the following day, and I kept that jacket on.
The road narrows up here.
Right?
It says the road narrows.
Yeah.
Oh.
You need the other gloves?
That's actually my wife talking to me as it relates to tomorrow's ride, and she was warning me that
Goodbye, dear.
the narrow road up ahead. There was actually in tomorrow's ride, there were 2 spots where I had to stop riding because of road construction. I mean, they totally got rid of the shoulder, and the area where they were working was unrideable. So I had to ride around it. I would have preferred to ride the entire way, but at the same time, it was probably about 8 miles, but it might have been a little more than that. I haven't figured it out exactly when I was going into Fort Stockton from Alpine. Now, as it relates to the southern tier at Alpine, it continues on to, I was going to say Marathon, but I can't remember off the top of my head, where I chose not to go that southern route, and I chose to go down to Fort Stockton and ride along the 10 for a couple of days, and then take the road off to Fredericksburg. Again, I did that, 1, just because of time, and 2, I thought the road would be nicer. Some of the video I've seen of the road going the other direction was just a lot of the same barren wasteland, so I wasn't in a hurry going that way, and there weren't a lot of major towns or places to go, and I admit I like stopping at the areas with better food choices, and it's always nice to have a Walmart in your area if you're in a motorhome. So again, here we are coming down into Alpine. Apparently some people actually have homes they rent out in the hills and make a living doing that. For the people that come up here for weddings or things like that, just to have a change of scenery. Texas isn't the most exciting state in the world, and for the southern tier, it's actually 1/3 of the ride of the southern tour is taken up in crossing Texas. But it wasn't the most exciting state to ride through. Thus far, this was the nicest part of the day for today, day 18. And before that, there was a nice ride leaving Las Cruces going into El Paso, Texas. That was a nice part of the ride and a nice change. But the ride across New Mexico was pretty boring and windy. Admittedly, I had a tailwind there. What can I say? This road at least has something to look at. It's much more interesting to have something rather than nothing in the same flat land off the left and off the right. and you're doing nothing but putting in hours on the bike so you can get from one point to the other. Now, I probably should explain. I actually have done this part in two different parts. I rode from San Diego to the Phoenix area of Arizona, where I live in Florence, Arizona. And then I rode on this trip from Florence to Austin, Texas, which is the area that I have my daughter living. So we were stopping there to visit her and then going up to Oklahoma. That was the plan. And then do the final third of the Southern Tier maybe next year when we have more time. I admire those people that can take the full month and a half off to do the entire Southern Tier in one thing. But I had some other issues as well. This has been a cold year, so we were starting off late a lot, and I don't like riding in the cold. I don't like riding in the heat either, extreme heat. I'm a fair weather rider. But so we were getting behind. The first day I only rode 40 miles of this second half of the second third of the Southern Tier, and that was again because of time. I just needed to get into the area of Tucson, Oro Valley. The following day I had driven back home because my wife had a church assignment to do, and then we drove back down to where I stopped. By the time we got down there, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and with several emergencies that came up, I just got to go to the other side of Tucson by the end of the day. Now, the issue I have is because I have stents, I take Plavix, and it actually causes issues with having saddle sores, so I get them really easy. And I was also taking another medication that increased the saddle sores. It's rather frustrating because I never had that as an issue before in my life. And I guess when you get old, your skin gets thinner anyhow. So I was having trouble after even a 60-mile ride doing that. So I was, some of my days, the first 2 days were essentially a little over 40 miles. The third day was almost 60. And then the day after that, I believe, was 60. The following day was around 40 miles because we had a church conference, and I took the ride between conferences and then took the next day off. So there were things that I just wasn't getting the miles in that I wanted. And it wasn't until coming up on my third week that things changed and I started getting a lot more miles in, and it was becoming a lot more enjoyable. It's a lot better when you can ride without problems for just do your 70 miles a day and get it over. And that's the way I'd recommend doing it. By the time on my last day of the trip, that was actually my best day for saddle sores. So that's a long story. Hopefully that probably bored you to death. So those are just some of the problems I had on the trip, which weren't problems at all. Up until this point, I haven't had a flat tire. Oh, is that right? Yes, it is. I didn't have a flat tire at all. I made it all the way to Texas before I had my first real flat. But my bike that I'm riding, this one has tubeless tires so that if I get a flat, I don't notice it. And of course, I didn't think about that. I thought that I would know if I was running out of goo. So when I finally had a serious flat in Texas, that stopped my ride that day. And it wasn't because I thought I blew the tire out. What I had done was ran out of goo in the tire and went to a bike shop and got it repaired with a new tire. And I probably didn't even need that new tire now that I think about it. That same thing happened to me by the time I got to Austin. My tire was going down, so by after 20 miles, I lost like 30 pounds of air. And so I just stopped the ride for that day since I was already in Austin. But when I put some more goo in the tire, it just stayed pumped up. So you just have to pay attention. But at least I wasn't making repair after repair after repair. I mentioned this because my backup tire is not a tubeless, doesn't have tubeless tires. It has regular tires. And I got a flat in that one. Okay, I actually recorded this, and apparently I didn't save it. That's how good I am at doing all this. We are now just on the outskirts of Alpine, and actually probably have been in the city limits for a little while. You can see everything is spread out, and shortly I'm just going to be coming up on my wife, where we just have a discussion about where we're turning, how far it is to the turn to her aunt's house. This shoulder is nice. It's not the smoothest shoulder, but it's a nice shoulder. A typical Texas road. So I guess that's about all I can say. The weather was fine other than the wind, but we don't have the wind right here. I just have to put time in to get done with the ride. Shortly you'll see the various stats for the end of the ride. Hopefully it shows the correct mileage and the time and elevation. By this time I've been taking it easy, and my heart rate is going way down. Somewhere around here is where we actually came up the following day to have lunch with her aunt and uncle. So my wife should be right here in front of me. Here we go. So it looks like I'm a little ways from her, but I'm not really. It looks like I stopped in front of her, but I'm not. And all I'm doing is checking to see where I'm at. So I know how far we got to where we're turning. And that's it for what's going on. Again, I appreciate you watching this video. I'm going to be going up the road a short ways, then following my wife to her aunt's house once we get on the road that turns off to the left. And well, it looks like everything's nice and relaxed. I can tell you that the wind totally wore me down, and as far as it goes, I was more exhausted on this day than any other day of the ride. This day was a short day riding, and my 90-mile day, I was far more exhausted today than just because of the wind. So here we take off in a short distance. I'll have moved it, and we're going now under a bridge that there's no shoulder at all going under the railroad overpass. You can see thus far 53 miles. Now I'm going 23 miles an hour, which is a nice, easy pace. Uh, and let's see, does that say 2 hours and 50 some odd minutes? Which sounds about right. And we're just, well, we do have a 1% elevation, so we're coming back up slightly. But this is the end of the ride. And again, I thank you for riding. We're making a left turn. I believe the car's going to pass me here shortly, and then I'm going to turn left. And this is the nice thing about having a rear radar. I can see those cars coming up on me. I do have a bad neck, so I have trouble turning my head, and it really helps. And there's my wife again, and I'm following her. So if you have any comments on the video, feel free to leave them. If you like the video, please give it a like. Don't give me a thumbs down, please. If there's something you think I can improve, just send me a little note in the video. I appreciate any positive comments that can help make a video like this better. I've tried it several different ways, and I just don't know which way people like it. So here we are. It's the end of the day. This is her aunt's property where we stay, spend the night. And again, thank you very much for watching. And if you were able to watch it through to this, have a good day. And again, thank you.